So, M3 Macs are out. Now it's time for me to talk M1 Pro 16-inch MacBook Pro. My previous Mac was M1 MacBook Air. For sure, it was a cute little thing to carry around, but it wasn't fast enough for what I do. So, eventually, I got myself a 16-inch MacBook Pro. And I like this laptop. No, I love it. And we'll get there. But first, I need to address some issues I never even expected to encounter, starting with the least serious ones. This one is less of an issue, but more of a stupid thing Apple did to this laptop. They put a half-depth SD card slot instead of a normal one. Just one single uncareful movement of yours and all your precious data is gone. If you are into conspiracy theories, here is one. I don't believe they didn't put a full depth slot because they didn't have enough space inside. I believe Apple did it so people wouldn't use SD cards to expand their Mac storage, and they would just configure a more expensive Mac paying directly to Apple. I hate Touch ID here. If my finger is even slightly wet, there is no way this thing letting me in. I go to my bathroom, wash my hands, return to my computer, and it asks me for a password because it doesn't recognize my finger. There is a big ass notch where they could have easily put a Face ID. Face ID makes much more sense in a laptop. You open the lid and you're good to go. Take Surface laptop, for example, with its Windows Hello facial recognition. However, Apple didn't even put it in M3 Macs. I have no idea why. The thing I didn't expect to talk about though is charger. The laptop is not always getting charged when I plug in the cable. So pretty often, connecting the charger, I do this. I don't know if the port gets dirty that fast or it's a build quality issue again, but and cleaning with a toothbrush does help. I have no idea why they changed Magsafe in the first place. They could have just made it compatible with older models and made money selling people new chargers as a replacement for the old ones with broken, not detachable cable. I've had issues with a hinge on M1 Air as well. It was making creaking sounds from time to time and just didn't feel reliable. Here is the same story. Maybe it's I who somehow mistreating the hinge. I don't know what to say. Adding to the list of things I didn't expect to discuss, the trackpad. As far as I remember, I didn't have any issues with the M1 Air trackpad, but it seems to be an issue here. I have that feeling that sometimes, if it even makes sense, trackpad just skips frames. It is really hard to explain, but let's say your computer is lagging and you are moving your pointer around, and sometimes it's not exactly where it is supposed to be. Computer is lagging, so trackpad is lagging too. But here, even if Mac is not lagging, sometimes my pointer is not where I expect it to be, and then I try to wipe the trackpad surface clean and it seems to be working okay again, or not. Well, I don't know what to say else in that regard, other than the fact that the problem definitely exists. What is definitely not a software problem and won't be fixed with future updates is the soldered RAM. I have a model with 16 gigs of it, and for me, it turned out to be not enough. Simply firing up some Android Studio projects, eating up memory quite heavily. I took these screenshots without any emulators running. With emulators, the situation is even worse. And apart from Android Studio or DaVinci Resolve, I also want to open Chrome with numerous of tabs, Microsoft Edge, some messengers I use for communication, and perhaps a music player. All of these consume significant amount of memory. As a result, my Mac relies heavily on a swap memory, which means it writes data to the SSD in order to free some RAM. Although macOS handles swap efficiently, I can still see the laptop choking. Sometimes it's for a while, sometimes just for a split second, and I barely notice it. So, as literally everyone said already, carefully think about how much RAM you need. You can't upgrade it. But if you ask me, at least 32 gigs is the way to go for such a machine, even though I'm perfectly aware that it's much more expensive and Apple practically ripping its customers off by forcing them to configure a Mac with more RAM, taking away the option to upgrade down the line. Now, as I start discussing the fact that storage is also soldered, you might probably expect me to tell you the same tales everybody else does, like if the swap memory is used a lot and SSD is being written on, it will wear out faster, and since you can't replace it, soon your Mac is going to the dumpster.
I'm sorry! I am free.
Actually, I believe that the problem of SSD wearing out is blown out of proportion. It does use swap memory a lot, yes, but if we look at some actual numbers and not just use abstract words, the situation is much different. On average, I write about 52 gigabytes a day to my Mac. If we suppose that 1 terabyte Mac can endure 600 terabytes, in my usage scenario, SSD will last about 32-33 years before I'm unable to write anything on it anymore. And passing my M1 Pro Mac down to my grandchildren is definitely not in my bucket list. Although I don't consider the lifespan of the SSD to be a problem, the fact that it is soldered to the motherboard is indeed an issue. Remember the Surface lineup? For a while they had soldered storage as well, but eventually Microsoft realized how stupid it was and put an easy to remove 20-30 SSD inside their new devices. If your Surface laptop or Surface Pro gets trashed beyond repair, you can easily retrieve your data just with the help of a screwdriver. And Apple decided to bake storage into motherboard for good. Though backing up your data is a good practice and should be done regardless, with M1 series chip Macs, it just comes as the part of the deal. You buy a Mac, you also buy an external SSD and set up a time machine backup, as long as you care about your data, of course. But even if the data is backed up, it still doesn't feel good knowing that if the SSD dies, your computer just won't turn on. And it seems that it can happen out of nowhere, thanks to Apple's poor engineering. Definitely check out Louis Rossmann's video on this topic for more info. This is a professional machine, which is literally what Pro in MacBook Pro stands for. Your data should be a priority in such a device, but for Apple, priority is the money they charge for storage upgrades, because that is obviously the main reason why you can't upgrade the storage yourself. I mean, who in their mind would pay $1,000 to upgrade from 1 terabyte to 4 terabytes when you can get the whole 4 terabyte stick for $250? And now comes my favorite part, the screen. Let's just say I expected more. For some reason, Apple decided to put a high resolution panel here. This means that everything is now smaller. If your vision is not entirely perfect, you will notice it right away. Of course, you can scale everything up, but it's not that 4:1 scaling anymore. And even macOS itself says that performance may be affected when you choose any scaling other than default. If you have an iMac or just macOS device connected to 5K display, for example, you probably remember those sites or programs where there is actual content in the center of the screen and a lot of free real estate around. So that extra resolution now brings this to M1 16-inch Mac as well. Well, enjoy. I have no idea why they did this. The resolution of the 2015 15-inch Mac was perfectly fine, and everything been optimized for this resolution for years already. But now Apple decided to change it. The only thing that extra resolution is good for is to show me some blank space around the actual content in the middle of the screen. Bigger numbers don't always mean better. The same can be said about 120Hz screen. The response time here is so slow that even with 60Hz panel, the image won't be able to change entirely before screen needs to get refreshed again. And they decided to put a 120Hz panel inside. Having such a slow panel is also strange, considering that Apple is making steps towards gaming on Mac. Tell me, as a gamer, how enjoyable is it to play on a display with the 40 to 90 milliseconds response time? If Apple really wants gamers to lean towards Macs, they better bring faster panels in the future generations of their computers. But for now, enjoy blur and smearing on your screen. Again, I knew that this comes with mini LED backlight, but I didn't think it would be noticeable to the degree of breaking experience. Watching something in different aspect ratios is good, as there is just pure black around. But the moment there is something extremely bright and dark at the same time, stars for example, it's a mess. I notice it immediately. I'm instantly reminded that I'm watching a movie. And at this point, I'm not even sure if I'd prefer a perfectly even regular backlight without dimming zones or this. Glow around the bright parts is really bad, especially if it's HDR content and brightness cranked up to the maximum. Consistency is sometimes just better. When I was talking projectors in my other videos, I said that one of the reasons I liked watching movies on a projector is because the image is consistent, no matter the angle, no matter the color it is showing right now. It is consistent, and nothing breaks your attention. But if something is constantly changing, when it's not supposed to be changing, you become aware, notice it, which really ruins the experience. That's how the human brain works. We are made to notice if something changes. The overall quality of the screen is good enough for me. And there is so much contrast, especially compared to 2015 Macs. And I can tell if I love it or hate it. I would probably prefer something in between. Story time. A while ago, I had a meeting with one dude and he brought his MacBook Air. It was either 2018 or 2019 model, and the anti-glare coating was completely destroyed. If you Google Staingate and look for the worst cases out there. That's what his Mac screen looked like. Naturally, I asked him which model it was exactly. It was MacBook Air with an M1 chip. I have no idea how he managed to destroy his screen coating entirely in such a short time, but he did. In my Air M1 review, I was talking about this issue. Although I had my Air only for a short while, there were already signs of coating wear enough. Some light imprints of the keyboard on the screen. And here on M1 Pro 16-inch MacBook Pro, it is the same story. There are already some signs of the screen coating coming off. It's barely noticeable, but it's definitely there. Means the problem hasn't gone away. So I don't close the lid anymore. The laptop just sits at my desk all the time with the lid open. And if I had to carry it somewhere, I need to figure out first what to put between the screen and the keyboard before closing the lid, like that piece of cloth that came with the Mac in the box. Gotta say, it feels extremely stupid. The Surface Pro and Surface Laptop do not use any anti-glare coating, and I can use them without any problems just fine. So, as I said in my M1 Air review, we should be given the option to buy a Mac without any coating at all. And in the context of a 16-inch M1 chip MacBook Pro, it makes even more sense. Because it is a great laptop, despite all I just said in the video earlier. My previous machine was an MSI Creator 15 OLED, which wasn't as bad as GYGABYTE Aero 15 OLED before it, but still I had a tough time managing it. Subpar cooling system, loud noise, I had to apply liquid metal to make the laptop is at least somehow manageable to work with. Mediocre build quality, inconsistent screen, stupid useless control centers, constant need to restart and tweak everything. The Windows switch can't work with swap memory properly. Boom, 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 boom. It was just an entry-level OLED laptop. The screen was definitely fun to watch stuff on, but it wasn't fun when I wanted to create anything with it or needed to stare at it for the whole day. Anyway, there is no way I can talk about that Creator 15 OLED without trashing it, so definitely watch the full review. And why am I telling you all this? Because none of this is present in Mac. There is no need to set up or tweak anything. It is silent. I restart it only when there is an update. The screen is good enough. The sound is good. The keyboard is good. It delivers the same performance when unplugged, has good battery life. The laptop is fast and does exactly what it was made for. It doesn't have 16 power modes. In fact, it doesn't have any power modes at all. I open the lid and I just work. That's all. I can focus entirely on what I'm doing. I love this laptop. Lord knows I do. Just the idea of owning it is so pleasant, to be honest. Sometimes I just close the lid and turn the laptop around in my hands, appreciating how awesome it is. It feels like I finally have a computer in my house on which I can work on without messing with anything. I just open the lid and get work done. It is a professional tool, you can tell. The laptop is so good that people do not want to upgrade it. It meets their needs, even for professionals. People will keep their M1 series Macs for much longer than any previous generations of MacBooks. And now imagine the screen of your beloved machine gradually developing patches and having vitiligo after a couple of years of you caring for this thing. Although longevity of the device is quite concerning, I consider the M series chip 16-inch MacBook Pro to be one of the best laptops you can buy right now, if not the best. Even the soldered SSD, soldered RAM, and presence of retarded screen coating do not stop me from saying that. Thank you for watching.